3,000 years ago, a city burned. Its walls crumbled, its people vanished, and its name faded into legend, until the world forgot whether it had ever existed at all. This is the story of Troy, a city so magnificent, so mythologized, that for centuries the greatest scholars on earth believed it was nothing more than a poet's dream. They were wrong. The legend of Troy begins with the most famous war in human history. According to Homer, writing in the 8th century BC, the city of Troy, known to its own people as Ilios, stood on the northwestern coast of what is now Turkey, overlooking the Aegean Sea and the narrow strait that connected two worlds. The city sat at one of the most strategically important locations in the ancient world, a choke point between Europe and Asia, controlling the passage of ships, goods, and armies between the Aegean and the Black Sea. Whoever held Troy held the gateway between civilizations. Troy was not merely a city, it was a symbol. Within its legendary walls lived a people of immense sophistication. Merchants, craftsmen, priests, warriors, and kings. The city had accumulated centuries of wealth from its position along the most profitable trade routes of the Bronze Age world. Merchants paid tolls to pass through the strait. Kings sent tribute. Empires negotiated. Troy sat at the center of the ancient world's commercial network, and it grew rich and powerful and proud. The city's walls were its greatest achievement. Built from massive limestone blocks, they rose in some places to 10 meters in height. Towers jutted from the walls at regular intervals, giving defenders a commanding view of every approach. The gates were designed with layers of protection, narrow passages that forced attackers to slow down and face defenders from all sides. Ancient visitors who looked upon these walls reportedly fell silent with awe. Here was a fortress that seemed to mock the very idea of conquest. But the story of Troy is not really about walls or trade routes. It is about human weakness, divine will, and the forces that drive civilizations to destroy one another. And like all the greatest stories in human history, it begins with beauty. Helen of Sparta was, by universal agreement of the ancient world, the most beautiful woman who had ever lived. She was the wife of Menelaus, king of Sparta, one of the most powerful rulers in the Greek world. Her beauty was so extraordinary that when she had been old enough to marry, the greatest heroes and kings of Greece had competed for her hand. The Greek hero Odysseus had been the one to suggest the solution to the competition. All suitors would swear an oath to defend whoever won Helen, thus preventing the bloodshed that her beauty might otherwise cause. It was a clever idea. It would not be clever enough. Paris was a prince of Troy, the second son of King Priam. He was handsome, charming, and not particularly suited to war. He had been chosen by the gods to settle a divine dispute, to judge which of three goddesses, Hera, Athena, or Aphrodite, was the most beautiful. Each goddess offered him a bribe. Hera offered power. Athena offered wisdom. Aphrodite offered him the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris chose Aphrodite's gift. He chose Helen. What followed has been debated for 3 millennia. Did Paris abduct Helen against her will? Or did Helen, unhappy in her marriage to the older Menelaus, willingly follow the charming Trojan prince across the sea? Homer's Iliad is deliberately ambiguous on this point. What is certain is that Paris arrived in Sparta as a guest, enjoyed the hospitality of Menelaus, and then sailed away with Helen and a significant portion of the Spartan treasury. He brought her to Troy, where his family received them with a mixture of celebration and dread. The Trojan prophet Cassandra, Paris's own sister, had long warned that Paris would bring ruin upon Troy. No one listened. No one ever did. Menelaus was furious, and an insult to a king was an insult to every king. He called in the oath that Odysseus had made all of Helen's suitors swear. From across the Greek world, the great heroes assembled. Agamemnon, the powerful king of Mycenae and Menelaus's brother, took command of the expedition. Achilles, the greatest warrior of his age, a man said to be invulnerable except for one spot on his heel, joined the fleet. Odysseus, the cleverest man in Greece, brought his ships. Ajax, the towering warrior. Diomedes, the fearless fighter. Nestor, the wise old counselor. They all came, and with them came 1,000 ships and tens of thousands of men. The Greek fleet assembled at Aulis, on the coast of Greece. Even before reaching Troy, the expedition faced disaster. The winds would not blow. The fleet was stranded. The prophet Calchas declared that the goddess Artemis demanded a sacrifice, the sacrifice of Agamemnon's own daughter, Iphigenia. Agamemnon, placing his ambition above his love, agreed. His daughter was brought to the altar. She was sacrificed. The winds blew. The fleet sailed. And Agamemnon's wife, Clytemnestra, never forgave him. The seeds of future tragedy were already being planted. The Greek fleet crossed the Aegean and landed on the beaches near Troy. The first man to leap from the ships onto Trojan soil, it was said, would be the first to die. A young warrior named Protesilaus made that leap. He was immediately cut down by the Trojans. The war had begun. For 9 long years, the war was a stalemate. The Greeks could not breach Troy's walls. The Trojans could not drive the Greeks back to their ships. The two sides met in battle on the plain before the city. Brutal, dusty, blood-soaked confrontations where individual heroes fought single combat while armies watched and waited. Men died every day. Heroes were made and broken, and Troy's walls stood. The city of Troy endured because of one man above all others. Hector, the eldest son of King Priam and the greatest warrior Troy possessed, was everything that Paris was not. Where Paris was vain and reckless, Hector was disciplined and noble. Where Paris had caused the war through selfishness, Hector fought it through duty and love of his people. He was a husband, a father, a son, and a defender, a man who knew the war was probably lost but who refused to abandon his city. Homer's greatest scene in the Iliad is not a battle. It is a farewell. Hector, about to return to the fighting, stops at the Scaean gate of Troy to say goodbye to his wife Andromache and their infant son Astyanax. Andromache begs him not to go. Hector takes his son in his arms, but the baby recoils in fear at the horsehair plume on his father's helmet. Hector laughs, removes the helmet, and holds his son. Then he hands the boy back to Andromache, prays to the gods that his son will one day be a greater man than his father, and walks back to the war. Both he and his wife know they will not see each other again. It is the most human moment in 3,000 years of storytelling. The turning point came in the 10th year of the war, when the Greek champion Achilles withdrew from the fighting. The cause was a dispute with Agamemnon over a captive woman. Achilles felt dishonored, betrayed by his own commander, and he refused to fight. Without Achilles, the Greeks began to lose ground. The Trojans, led by Hector, pushed the Greeks back to their very ships. The Greeks were on the verge of defeat. Then Achilles' closest companion, his beloved friend Patroclus, convinced Achilles to let him wear his armor and lead the Greeks back into battle to boost their morale. Achilles agreed. Patroclus went into battle dressed as Achilles. The Trojans, thinking the great champion had returned, fell back in fear. But Patroclus pressed too far, pushed by the intoxication of battle beyond what Achilles had warned him. He was met by Hector. In the fierce fight that followed, Hector killed Patroclus and stripped him of Achilles' armor. What happened next changed everything. When news of Patroclus' death reached Achilles, his grief was absolute. His fury was beyond anything the war had yet produced. He roared his anguish to the sky, a cry so terrible that the goddess Thetis, his divine mother, heard it from beneath the sea. Achilles returned to the war. He did not return for glory, or for honor, or for Helen. He returned to kill Hector. The duel between Achilles and Hector is the central moment of the Iliad, the collision of two worlds, two fates, two kinds of greatness. Achilles, burning with grief and divine fury. Hector, knowing he could not win but facing his death with dignity. They met outside Troy's walls, before the eyes of both armies and all the gods of Olympus. The fight was brutal and brief. Achilles drove his spear through Hector's throat. Troy's greatest defender fell in the dust of the plain he had spent 10 years defending. But the death of Hector was not the end. Fresh allies arrived to help Troy, including the Amazon queen Penthesilea and the Ethiopian warrior Memnon. And then came the archer Paris, the man who had started the entire war, who drew his bow and loosed an arrow that struck Achilles in his one vulnerable point, his heel. The greatest warrior in the world, the man who had seemed beyond human defeat, died from an arrow to the heel. The gods had their say. The siege continued. It seemed it might continue forever. And then came the horse. The idea was Odysseus's. The cleverest mind in Greece had devised the cleverest plan in military history. The Greeks appeared to abandon their camp, sailing away from Troy's shores and leaving behind a single, enormous gift on the beach, a massive wooden horse, the height of a building. An inscription said it was an offering to Athena for a safe voyage home. The Greeks were gone. The war, it seemed, was over. Inside Troy, debate raged. The Trojan prophet Cassandra screamed that the horse was a trick, that disaster was hidden within it. She had always prophesied truly. She was never believed. The priest Laocoon thrust his spear into the horse's side and warned the Trojans not to trust the Greeks even bearing gifts. Then, before anyone could act on his warning, two enormous sea serpents rose from the waves and crushed Laocoon and his two sons to death. The Trojans took this as a divine sign. The gods wanted the horse brought inside. They pulled the great wooden structure through their gates, even knocking down part of the wall to make it fit. Troy celebrated. The war was over. That night, the Trojans feasted and drank and let their guard fall for the first time in 10 years. As the city slept, a hidden door opened in the horse's belly. Odysseus, Menelaus, Diomedes, and a dozen other warriors lowered themselves silently to the ground. They moved through the sleeping streets like shadows. They opened the city gates, and the Greek army, which had never really left, only sailed around the headland and waited in darkness, came flooding back. What happened next is almost too terrible to describe. Troy, the unconquerable city, fell in a single night. The Trojans, drunk on celebration and surprise, could mount no organized defense. The Greeks poured through every street, killing and burning. Priam, the old king, was cut down at the altar of Zeus, a sacrilege that would later be said to have brought a curse upon the Greeks themselves. Hector's infant son Astyanax was thrown from the walls, lest he grow up to avenge his father. The women of Troy were taken as slaves, including Hector's widow Andromache, who was given to Achilles' own son. Helen was reclaimed by Menelaus, who had come to kill her and instead, seeing her face again, found he could not. Troy burned through the night. By morning, nothing remained but ash, ruin, and legend. For 2,000 years after these events, educated people debated whether any of it was true. Homer was a poet, they said, perhaps a brilliant one, but a poet nonetheless. The Trojan War was mythology. Troy was no more real than Mount Olympus. Then came Heinrich Schliemann, born in Germany in 1822. Schliemann was the son of a pastor who read him Homer as a child. He grew up convinced Troy was real. He spent his young adulthood building a trading empire in St. Petersburg in California during the gold rush, in the indigo trade, accumulating the fortune that would fund his obsession. He taught himself ancient Greek. He read the Iliad over and over, and in 1868, he traveled to northwestern Turkey. The hill at Hisarlik had been identified by a British consul named Frank Calvert as a possible site for Troy. Calvert had already done some digging. He convinced Schliemann, and in 1871, Schliemann arrived with money, determination, and a small army of workers. He began digging with almost reckless energy, cutting a massive trench through the middle of the hill, destroying as much as he uncovered. What he found beneath the hill of Hisarlik astonished the world. Not one Troy, but nine. 9 cities, built layer upon layer over 5,000 years of continuous human habitation. The lowest levels dated to 3000 BC, making them older than the Great Pyramid. Each successive layer represented a different era, a different people, a different chapter in the long story of this extraordinary place. In May of 1873, near the bottom of his excavations, Schliemann made the discovery that made him world famous. Beneath what appeared to be a burned layer, he found a cache of gold and silver objects unlike anything seen since antiquity. Cups, weapons, jewelry, and most spectacularly, 2 golden diadems of extraordinary craftsmanship, consisting of thousands of individual gold pieces hammered with incredible skill. Schliemann sent his workers away, claiming it was an early break time, and excavated the treasure himself, smuggling it out of Turkey in his wife Sophia's shawl. He called it the treasure of Priam. He placed the great golden diadem on Sophia's head, photographed her wearing it, and sent the image to newspapers around the world. The world went wild. Troy was real. Schliemann was a hero. The story of Homer had been proven, except not quite. Later analysis revealed that Schliemann's Troy II, where he found the gold, dated to around 2400 BC, fully 1,000 years before the Trojan War was supposed to have taken place. He had found gold, certainly. He had found a burned city, certainly. But he had found the wrong Troy. The correct candidate, archaeologists now believe, is Troy 7, the 7th layer from the bottom, dating to approximately 1180 to 1300 BC. This is the layer that corresponds to the period when the Trojan War is traditionally dated. And Troy 7 tells a compelling story. Its walls show catastrophic fire damage. Human skeletons have been found lying in the streets in postures suggesting sudden, violent death. Unburied bodies, broken storage vessels, evidence of a city that was attacked without warning and destroyed utterly. Was this Homer's Troy? Almost certainly, it was at least part of the inspiration. Modern scholarship suggests the Trojan War legend grew from a real military conflict, or perhaps several conflicts, between the Mycenaean civilization of Bronze Age Greece and the prosperous city of Wilusa, the Hittite name for a city in precisely the location of Troy. Hittite diplomatic texts from the period actually mention a place called Wilusa and a king called Alexandru, startlingly similar to the name Alexander, which was Paris's alternative name in Greek tradition. The war that Homer describes was almost certainly not a single conflict. It was probably a compression of decades of conflict between the Greek world and the cities of Western Anatolia, filtered through centuries of oral tradition before Homer finally wrote it down. The gods and the heroes and the wooden horse were the mythological overlay. But beneath the mythology, something real had happened. A great city had burned. A civilization had ended. And the memory had been so powerful that it refused to die. The site at Hisarlik continued to be excavated through the 20th and into the 21st century. German archaeologist Manfred Korfmann led major excavations from 1988 until his death in 2005, revealing that the ancient city of Troy was far larger than Schliemann had imagined, perhaps 10 times larger, with a vast lower city spread across the plain below the citadel walls. This was not a small town. This was a metropolis by ancient standards, with a population that may have reached 10,000 people at its height. Today, the ruins of Hisarlik are a UNESCO World Heritage Site, visited by hundreds of thousands of people each year. The excavated walls of ancient Troy rise from the Turkish hillside, worn, weathered, battered by time, but still standing. The 9 layers of civilization are visible in cross-section, like pages in the longest history book ever written. Archaeologists still work here every summer, patiently extracting new knowledge from the soil. The legacy of Troy extends far beyond archaeology. Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, the story of the war and the story of Odysseus's long journey home, are among the foundational texts of Western civilization. They were the first great works of European literature. Every writer, every storyteller, every filmmaker who has ever told a tale of war, love, fate, and heroism has been working in Homer's shadow. Virgil used Troy as the origin myth of Rome in the Aeneid. Shakespeare wrote about Troilus and Cressida. Modern films, novels, and video games return again and again to the stories that Homer first told. The phrase Trojan Horse has entered every modern language as a metaphor for hidden danger, for deception dressed as a gift. We still warn each other about gifts that seem too good to be true. We still recognize the pattern. Pride goes before a fall, and the enemy within is more dangerous than the enemy without. Troy fell, but Troy was never truly defeated. A city can be burned, its walls thrown down, its people scattered. But Troy did more than survive. It became the foundation on which Western civilization built its self-understanding. The Greeks defined themselves against Troy. The Romans claimed descent from Trojan survivors. Medieval European kings traced their lineage to Trojan princes. The mythology of Troy is woven into the deepest roots of how the Western world understands itself. And somewhere beneath the Turkish hillside, in soil that holds 5,000 years of human memory, the real Troy still sleeps. Not all of it has been excavated. Not all of its secrets have been told. The archaeologists go back every year, and every year the earth gives up something new. A piece of pottery, a stretch of wall, a bronze arrowhead, and the story gets a little more real, a little less legendary, a little more heartbreaking. Because Troy was not a myth. Troy was a city full of people. People who woke up one morning and thought the war was over. People who celebrated and drank and thanked their gods and went to sleep. People who never woke up. 3,000 years later, we still remember them. We remember Hector, the noble defender who knew he was going to die and went anyway. We remember Cassandra, who told the truth and was never believed. We remember Achilles, who chose glory and a short life over safety and a long one. We remember the women of Troy, whose names history mostly forgot but whose suffering Homer did not. Troy does not vanish. Troy endures. Because the story of Troy is not the story of one city's fall. It is the story of every civilization that ever believed itself invincible. It is the story of pride and beauty and the terrible consequences that follow when human beings mistake fortune for permanence. Troy burned, but its flame never went out. And as long as someone, somewhere, picks up Homer's Iliad and reads those first words, "Sing, O goddess, the anger of Achilles son of Peleus," Troy will stand again, its towers catching the light of an eternal Mediterranean sunset, its people alive and breathing and unaware of what is coming. That is what Homer gave the world. Not history, something better, memory that never dies.